Thanks for checking out the Chrissy Mayer podcast. We are on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification icon. And if you're on iTunes, please go subscribe and leave a sexy or creepy review on there. I will be reading the best or worst reviews every week, so long as they are 5 stars. I've been getting some pretty good ones, so I'm very, very happy about that. I'm very excited to have this guy on the podcast today. I have known him for years. He has a show called Quite Frankly every night, 7 to 9 p.m. on the Zadalza network. It's streamed live on YouTube, I think Periscope, Twitch, and then it becomes a podcast that you can find on I'm fucking up your intro. And then he also does a podcast called the Dark to Light podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Frank Valbiro.
Hey, you did pretty well there. No, that's everything. That's pretty much it. You didn't screw anything up.
Okay.
And thank you for having me here. I know everybody's going to notice that I am in the same location that the CIA created all the Bin Laden videos.
I was like, wow, I didn't know if you were about to host Saturday Night Live or not from that background.
Subterranean. But that's what I'm so happy to be. And yes, it has been years that we've known each other. And I always love these little intertwining paths that everybody are on, because ultimately, if you stick to what you love doing, you always end up crossing paths with people who are doing the same thing. And when it's a familiar face, you know that everybody's on the right track.
Yeah, I love that too. And even though like we crossed paths at Zadalza like years ago, this might have been 2015, I had a podcast with a couple other comedians and Frank Pellegrino, Booker, boyfriend, comedy extraordinaire. And we were doing a podcast. That was together.
Earlier than 2015 is when we moved down to that first studio.
Oh God. Okay. So maybe it was 2013.
You guys started
2014.
Yeah, at least. So that's good.
It was 2014. And that was a great podcast. And that was down at Zadalza studio in Port Chester. And then you guys moved studios. And I always remember there was a cat there that I liked very much. And what's cool is that even though we I'm no longer at that studio, it's like we're still sort of in each other's orbits.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that too with kind of like the conspiracy theory people. It's like people who like comedy, people who like conspiracy stuff, and then it's nice.
You need to. First of all, I mean, a large part now, I have also you and Frank, you guys were so gracious to give me the opportunity, and still the only time I ever did it, of doing a little stand-up. It's the only time I always wanted to. And I, even though that's only the one time I tried it out, observational comedy is a huge part of what I do every night. And like you just said right there, if you're not able to actually ascertain what's going on around you and poke fun at what's going on, or even you have to be critical of even the most mundane things to find some kind of a disparity in it to make it comedic. And I think that is why, at least for a time, most comedians would gravitate toward conspiratorial thinking and trying to see if there's something else behind it, because human machinations, they're so twisted, and that's when comedy was really good. But now we're living a parody, so it's just
and really, like, we're doing kind of the same things. It's like it's the same power of observation, and then the ways in which we try to make light of it, or not, and then that's what makes you skew more towards comedy. I mean, you were funny for a first time doing stand up. Like, I was like, I was like, he's had some public speaking experience. He's no noob here. So when did you start doing Quite Frankly? What was the?
I actually started a little bit before you. I mean, maybe before you guys showed up and you started doing your first iterations of your podcast at our studio.
That was called 3 Drink Minimum.
3 Drink Minimum. And I was starting to do it a little bit on my own, because when I was doing Zadalza in New York with Anthony and Mike every Tuesday and Thursday night since 2006, it got to a point where around 2010, 2011 is when I started really diving deep into more so hidden history. And I was so compelled by that it started throwing me more into analyzing everyday political arena stuff and what it might mean in a more of an occult kind of a perspective. And I didn't want to muddy the waters of that very goofy kind of a podcast that we did. And I think around 2011 is when I started a little bit, maybe once or twice a week for a half hour, doing a show where I did like little spin-offs, where I did one night I was talking about the Federal Reserve. Another night we did a little bit more 9/11 truth and things like that. And then eventually from there, here I am now. It is Monday through Friday, 2 hours a night, and I'm doing it full time. Wow. So it's, yeah.
That's like a Rogan amount of talking. Yeah.
And a lot of times I'm alone, but I got great guests that come on in now. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Do you have like regular callers?
Oh yeah. Times for calls. It's all live. That's why, if I was doing it 2 hours by myself, pre-recorded, I'd struggle, but it's so great to have a live audience there to play off of. And there's a lot more inspiration for, improv. So there's that. That's where I came from though.
Yeah, good. No, it's an awesome show. And Frank, you're a fellow libertarian as well.
Yeah, I would say so. Small government. I'm a minarchist. I haven't gone full ANCAP yet, but it's we're getting there. We really are. Interesting.
Because I had Spike Cohen on, who is kind of a self-proclaimed anarchist, and he is currently the running mate with Joe Jorgensen, who's the Libertarian candidate for president this year. And it's interesting because I haven't had her on the show yet, but I have had Spike Cohen on, and I have had Vermin Supreme on, and both Spike and Vermin are kind of, I'm not going to call them weirdos. I'm going to say they're out. They color outside the lines.
They're eccentric.
They're eccentric, yes. Spike has been, he's gone shirtless. Vermin has a boot on his head, almost all the time. And Vermin has, run for president every year since '92, I think. Not that he ever, I think.
He's a regular Ralph Nader.
Yeah. Not that he ever, I think, expects to win, but he's more about like doing it for not really quite for the show of it, but he's kind of just making a statement by running. And do you think that these kind of goofy moves hurt the party, or do you think that ultimately they're good for?
I honestly, for a long time I don't actually say I'm a member of the Libertarian Party. I have libertarian, very Ron Paul-esque leanings, and I think very traditionally. I'm an American traditionalist in that sense. I'm very, very strict Jeffersonian constitutionalist, if you want to talk about labels. So very Jeffersonian in my thinking, in thinking and acting locally as far as government goes. The smaller, the better. But as far as official Libertarian Party dealings, it has been kind of a shit show for a long time, and it's kind of embarrassing to me. So I haven't, I remember there was I think there was a party convention 8 years ago. I don't know when the hell it was. People showed up and somebody was naked, or they were in a G-string on stage.
Wow.
I'm saying like, oh no. And then of course, you have people with the gimmicks like Vermin Supreme. And then of course, the last couple of times that I voted for Gary Johnson in 2012. I voted for him after Ron Paul was shafted, and I just threw it on out there. But once he popped up from 2012 until 2016, when I saw him doing more and more interviews, especially one on Rogan's show, where he talked about, he did a test, like an I stand with test, to see where the hell he aligns. And he said that he aligned 75% with Bernie Sanders. I said, wait, you're a libertarian and you're aligning with someone who espouses the most totalitarian form of government ever conceived, mankind, communism? I just don't understand it. So there's too much. There's too much that has repelled me, and I don't know. I don't like parties as it is. So.
Wow. Do you think he was saying that to kind of be like, oh, look, I'm
maybe
similar to Bernie, come over here?
Maybe because, I know that he has a little bit more he has a fiscal conservative background, socially liberal. I used to think that was the easiest way to define libertarianism. It's almost like your Blade, the vampire hunter. It's like you can exist in both worlds. But I think that they go so far with the socially liberal aspect of it that it ultimately destroys the overall message. Like, I don't, sure, okay, I'm pretty live and let live, but I wouldn't go and hang out with somebody with a boot on his head. That's not somebody I'm going to keep company with and have a coffee and Entenmann's cake with. But it really detracts away. Just like many people, you want to talk about conspiracy and hidden history, many people have been kept away from some really compelling subjects because of the performance art that Alex Jones represents.
Right.
It's the same kind of thing there.
Yeah, and like he's really not that crazy. I mean, like his delivery is, like you said, very performative, and he loves the drama.
Yeah.
And it's his delivery, but it's like, the more stuff of his I listen to, it's like, all right, the stuff that was so insane a couple of years ago, it's like a lot of it is becoming more of the part of the mainstream conversation, like, Pizzagate, etc.
Absolutely. Even down to little things that have become little cultural memes, like the whole gay frogs thing. When he says, I'm sick and tired of them putting chemicals in the water that makes the freaking frogs gay. And everybody thinks, oh man, he's crazy. That's insane. And then you realize atrazine is real. And you realize that it does have this effect. You realize that we actually, as a government, we actually considered dropping bombs, dropping almost like, crop dusting parts of Cuba with these types of
farting and then walking away.
Absolutely. And we wanted to crop dust Cuba with these kind of effeminizing chemicals.
Seriously? Wait, what is it called?
Atrazine. Yeah.
And this is a chemical that legit can make somebody gay?
Absolutely. Well, it definitely feminizes frogs. It makes them, it just takes, I'm telling you. So you look at that, you read it, and you say, okay, well, it's being delivered by a guy who is easily attacked because of his antics and his delivery. But if you go into how much he said, it's scary how much has actually been, can be proven to be true or have come to fruition.
And what do you think is the motive behind this idea to feminize males? If they're testing it on frogs, thinking that they're going to drop it on humans, like what would be the desired effect there?
Well, I mean, you have a very macho culture out there in Cuba and in Central and South America, and at a time when Cuban communism was a big hot ticket item in the United States, and the deep state over here, the national security state, really wanted to take them out. I'd have to imagine that neutralizing at least some portion of a nation's fighting force by making them more passive and a little bit more effeminate would be an advantage to an aggressor. I mean, we did other things over there in Cuba too. For all the people who believe that chemtrails and weather manipulation is something that is outlandish, all you have to do is go and research Operation Popeye. Popeye is we were flooding the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Vietnam by cloud seeding. The Vietnam War is the first time we weaponized weather, and not only do we seed clouds to wash out enemies, especially in those tunnels that they were digging, but going back to Cuba again, we actually seeded clouds outside off the shore of Cuba to draw away their rain to kill their sugar crops.
Whoa!
And so there's just
I had no idea.
There's so much waiting for you, Chrissy.
When did you? And I've also actually read that there's a little bit of an agenda to feminize males here in this country. Conspiracy theorists will say, okay, this whole rise of the beta male, and how every male has toxic masculinity unless you are like 100-pound barista in Brooklyn, right? Like that the typical male is like toxic, or the typical male traits are toxic traits.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's been in the culture for several years now. So it's like
the trap, and of course, what's the trap in there? I ask myself, because my father's gay. I have a gay bandmate. I was raised by strong, moody Italian women. I have there's not a hateful bone in my body. But and it's not, once again, not to even discount the fact that in nature, people have homosexual feelings.
Of course.
But what is behind any kind of at least a cultural promotion behind exacerbating that kind of expression in sexuality, or even chemically inducing something that feminizes men and disrupts that natural balance that we have between the sexes. And then, of course, outside of that, you look at the feminism, third wave feminism here, that is really just a way of destroying relations between the sexes, just like we're seeing relations between the races being destroyed deliberately as well. So what is the reason for all this stuff? And if you want to talk about any of that in a responsible way, you run the risk, if you don't articulate very carefully, of being either called sexist, a homophobe, a racist, and you just retreat to your corner and shut the hell up. And that serves somebody's purpose, not ours.
Exactly.
Somebody's, not ours, though.
Yeah, and it's gotten to the point where the average person is exactly like you said. If you are not so careful, there are all, over the last few years, we've now been able to plant all these sort of conversational landmines that the average person just does not, like you said, if they're not so careful and as eloquent as can be, navigate through a conversation, they're going to step on something and they're going to be called exactly misogynist, racist, sexist, anything, right? And it's to get people to shut up. So there's like a whole group of people that are sort of scared. They don't want to lose their jobs. It's like, they don't want to be canceled out of their livelihood.
Seriously.
And if you're not, now it's kind of like every corporation, has to be all about whether it's like, regardless of what they really think of it, like if they're not all about Black Lives Matter right now, like they're going to go out of business. It's like the get woke or get broke.
Yeah. Well, I always ask this, if you're part of a movement that is sponsored by companies like Nike and promoted by CNN, are you really part of a revolution? Is that really a revolution when you have Nike and CNN on your side? I mean, I wish that there were things like that people would really step back and say, all right, if my city truly has a policing problem, like it has been uncovered that at the PBA meetings, everybody is wearing white hoods. There needs to, we've found a real big problem here. Or if a certain type of local ordinance or a certain type of, a technique for subduing a suspect or whatever is proving to be more harmful than useful, then it is up to people in the affected area to pool their influence together, get elected on city councils, become mayors, become police chiefs, whatever the hell you want to do, and figure out what the hell's going on and actually impact the locality that's the problem. Instead, the entire country, you would think that Minneapolis, Minnesota was in your backyard, even though most of us are thousands of miles away from Minnesota. And you say, well, okay, well now these little small town tragedies have been made personalized to people all over a country of 330 million. And there is a huge corporate push behind it. There's this gigantic media push behind it. People are having their lives, their relationships, their livelihoods, their careers ruined because of not racist ideas, but just a general sense of inquisitiveness about why we're taking this route.
Yeah.
It's
asking
scary.
Why does not make you a racist. Asking why this has become the biggest taking over all parts of everyone's life. Suddenly the most important thing. Asking about why that is does not make you a racist. Doesn't mean that you don't support, it's just insane to, like, we all agree that there sometimes is a police brutality problem, but that doesn't mean, as we know, like not all cops are bad. And the fact that, like you said, they should be getting training, they should be becoming police chiefs, rather than the trend now is just like burn it all down, defund all the police. And I actually heard that in New York City, like they haven't actually put less money towards the police. They just sort of have rerouted the money. Like instead, like basically the Mater Meads, which were part of the police form, the police, they just moved it over, I think, to the mass transit. So they just really shifted the money around.
Chrissy, there's never
taken it away.
The one thing that you look at this and you say, okay, well, what do the people that say that they really want change? I always said, and every time I have a chance, especially if I'm talking to a black friend of mine or a Hispanic friend or a white friend of mine that think this way, because obviously Black Lives Matter, which is a redux of Occupy Wall Street, but it's a little bit harder to criticize it because it has a civil rights masquerade about it. It's the same exact thing. It's funded, it's run, it's directed by white communists. And when people when people realize that communism is going to kill us all, you're not going to be made into you're not there's no pot of gold at the end of this rainbow except for anybody. I mean, socialism, communism, Marxism is, I mean, that's for the people. It's not for the Marxists. They live a lavish life that you would think most capitalists live. And you look on all that stuff, and it really creates a scenario where I always say, if you really want to figure out a way that we can start changing things in society, people have got to become more conservative than either me or anybody. I mean, you have to become more conservative, because it really is, the system has created this horrible cesspool of a culture that we have that, of course, translates into everything. It translates into our form of politics. It translates into what's going on in the street. What goes on in the street is what it warrants or doesn't warrant police action. So the worse things get, the worse things are going to continue to get. Now, I don't know why people think that the only way that we can actually have change is for going 5 miles farther in the direction we're already going. I don't know.
Why do you think more of a shift towards conservatism would be helpful for this country?
Well, if you think about what's happening right now, we are in I like trying to keep this in terms that people can really understand from their personal lives, because a lot of people are waking up for the first time, and there's a lot less distractions out there. You can't watch a baseball game. You can't watch all of sports has been taken away. Comedy has been completely co-opted. There's nothing to watch anywhere. So people are a little bit forced to look themselves in the mirror and ask why the hell the world is so bad. And I think that the greatest way to really start easing yourself into that is to think about how the hell things have gone right or wrong for you in your interpersonal relationships. And we're in a portion right now where we have absolutely no sense of what is ours and what is somebody else's. We have no sense of where somebody's rights begin, another person's rights end, and you have no sense of there's no togetherness. So we're in a bad, abusive relationship with people we don't know, who have been collectivized under this centralized government system here, all powered by welfare and entitlements and education, all things that our Constitution doesn't allow. 95% or more of government expenditures are illegal. It's just,
even welfare?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If the state of New York wants to create, that's the beauty of our 10th Amendment. If the state of New York wants to create a safety net system for the citizens of New York, they can socialize healthcare, whatever, but they're going to have to be able to pay for it with the money that they can generate in state. And if you figure it out, then fine, you can do that. That's the beauty. That's why we have 50 individual 50 individual sovereign pretty much nations over here that were allowed to experiment with things that are good for their local regional culture, their customs, whatever they're able to do. What we've done now is we've tied people from Washington State to Delaware to Maine to Wyoming to Kentucky, all at the ankles. And we are we're so bound together, and everything that people want to do, which life is so different from neighborhood to neighborhood, let alone region to region. We're supposed to have top-down solutions for everything, and we're becoming more embittered. We're becoming more hateful of each other, and we don't even realize or respect where the money is coming from. In local charity, and this is what I'm talking about with libertarianism, how conservatism comes on into it. With local charities, with churches, with communities, where you used to get all of your welfare from, people understood and they knew who was helping them out. They knew who was watching their kids. They knew who was bringing the groceries to them. They knew who to thank, and they also had a little bit of inclination of not wanting to overstay their welcome. Americans are with all the taxes that are taken away from us, with how we are completely milked by this government, we are still second to none in charitable givings every year. Hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that are given away every year. We're a very charitable people. When we see people down in the dumps, we help. But government has come on in and they've tied us all together with these systems of welfare that masquerade as charity. But it's lacking the one thing that makes it charity, and it's that human connection. And now when people see a president being up for election, they think that's the person who's supposed to make your life level or fight for you, whether or not you are in Chattanooga or if you are in Houston or whatever the hell it is. The president of the United States is only supposed to be the face, the representative of the states in foreign diplomacy. We've perverted our entire life here. Our entire civic existence has been perverted. We need to be able to break it all apart and divorce ourselves a little bit more. I think that distance will probably be the greatest thing that makes the heart grow fonder again.
So what you're saying is, let's say Minneapolis did have a big police brutality problem. And let's say that that's not the case in many other states and cities, yet kind of like I don't want to say the media, but like the government and the media and, all these now corporations jumping on board with Black Lives Matter. It's almost like, would you say that it's kind of making it everybody's problem where it should be a localized issue in the areas that do have police brutality?
Absolutely.
Kind of like a much bigger problem.
Absolutely. I would challenge all of your listeners. It would take 5 minutes to read through this. If you go and you take out your pocket constitutions or you go on the internet and you just type in the United States Constitution and you go to Article 1, Section 8, it is a very short list of enumerated powers. That is the only thing that our government, our Congress in Washington, D.C., can do top down for everything. And most of it has to do with regulating foreign trade and providing for military defense against foreign invasion. Everything else is relegated to the states under the 10th Amendment. Anything that's not stated is the 10th Amendment issue. So yeah, Minneapolis, if they have a real problem, they need to figure out what the hell they're doing on over there. And ultimately, in the city of Minneapolis, anybody that lives there, the ultimate, for you and I, you're still in New York, right, Chrissy?
Yeah.
The greatest political figure in our lives should be the governor of our state. But that's scary enough.
Ugh.
That monkey man in Albany. But that should be it, because the what could be done at the state level is almost completely unlimited, as long as, of course, it is in line with the state constitution, which I'm sure nobody is reading their state constitutions. This is how much responsibility we have as individuals. I mean, and so the more we take our hands off the wheel and the more we delegate and kick up our responsibilities to lunatics, 535 lunatics mostly in DC, why the hell is anybody surprised that one size fits all doesn't fit well?
Wow. I didn't even know we had a state constitution. Is that embarrassing or what?
It's yeah, well, there you go.
I got to get off TikTok.
Feeding those Chinese data collectors.
Oh, yeah.
I heard about
I read that too. And then, I mean, I didn't log off completely, but I stopped going on. But I could probably, I just figured it'd be a way to get, more comedy fans. But I don't know. It's mostly 14-year-olds on there.
Do they think you're funny?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know if the younger generation appreciates comedy. I think. Well,
you're pretty. I remember your your stand-up. You're pretty abrasive. You will go there. So, I mean, this is but then again, I do think that there is going to be I think that there's going to be a resurgence. They say that children like what their parents hate. And a lot of the parents right now are complete weirdos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that the kids are going to surprise us in the next generation or two.
It is interesting that you say, because, we read a lot about, and I had a conversation with Buck Angel on a previous episode, and he was born female, medically transitioned to male, but didn't have any bottom surgery, and he actually used it to his advantage. He was like, oh, Buck Angel, the man with the pussy, like he got into porn, like he's doing great. One of the most well-adjusted people I've ever spoken to, like one of my favorite podcast episodes too. And he actually said, like, he's like, no, I admittedly have gender dysphoria. I admittedly have this is a mental illness. And what's kind of happening now with the trans movement, it's being like co-opted by mostly these male, it's oddly enough, like mostly more male to female transition folks who it's almost like, and Buck was able to prove like, no, they're shoving it down our throats. Like it's, you know, starting like in academia really. And it's getting to the point where it's like, almost like the kids that are more kids are transitioning, period, and also earlier than ever before. And it's because I can understand, like, you're a kid, you're kind of lost. Like I was a tomboy, but if you're as a little kid and you're lost, you're still growing, and you go, oh, well, if I become part of this group, I feel special and I get more attention and no one can bully me. And you know, Buck was saying it's actually very dangerous. He's like, these kids should not be getting these hormones. Like, they should be going through tons of therapy before any of that is even on the table.
I know Buck Angel too. Well, not personally, but I remember reading about Buck years ago, and that was always a very intriguing story. And I mean that, but that's great. See, there's other people. There's this other guy, Walt Hare. Walt Hare. He was a male to female transition. And he detransitioned, and now he talks about how it's very dangerous what's being pushed and what's being made available to children who are prepubescent.
Yeah.
And then you have to then also, not only that, but there is no attention that is paid to regret, the transition regret. There's no attention that is paid to and once again, this all comes down to, are we a compassionate society? Yeah. I have I did some side jobs for, I forgot, I did some like video editing for it's a transgendered friend of my father. He didn't start out transgendered. First I said, why is this guy's face so well done? Like his face looked like separate from the rest of his body. It like glowed for some reason. And then all of a sudden he showed up at one of my father's theater premieres at Westchester Broadway Theater, and he was dressed like Jessica Rabbit. I said, what the hell? But either way, you know, his name is Fran, and Fran, I call Fran. That's what this is.
Talking about Trans Francisco?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know Fran?
I know Fran.
Okay, so then Fran. So listen, here's the thing. Fran is a grown adult. I will call you Fran, which when he shows up at my father's Christmas parties every year, there's always a hello, an exchange, whatever. And that is where, but see, this is the thing. That's where compassion begins and ends. You can't go beyond that and say, oh, this person is now a woman, they put a wig on. No. But as long as we can all maintain that, then there's a place where you can be compassionate with people who live radically different lives than you and deserve still human decency and respect paid to them. But what's going on right now is, once again, one of those really odd, overt pushes to even detach people from a very rudimentary I don't know, reality.
Like, we all care about trans people, of course. And like, I know maybe in my life, I've been friends with like maybe 3, and I live in New York, you know, which is like, it's like, I think the average person, you know, living in the middle of the country, they probably don't know any trans people. I think it's another example of something which was like, maybe it's kind of a local issue, but blowing it up and then having this movement being like like Black Lives Matter, kind of co-opted by something larger and possibly sinister, and kind of making it a national issue, when it's like, this is not what the majority of people are sort of facing and dealing with. Like, let's focus on our problems locally.
The LGBT Incorporated, I call them. LGBT Incorporated has, first of all, they are running Black Lives Matter along, you know, because what is this all really about? This is really all about political movements toward radical leftism. And it's a subjective kind of reality that was born in the Frankfurt School in Germany. And it's all about destroying objective reality, any kind of objective sense of morality, and even objective science. Like I said before, You know, Buck Angel understands he's got some stuff going on, and this is the way that he more
Yeah.
comfortably
That's
lives a
how he
life.
lives happy. Like, this is the way he can live, so he's not suicidal. Like, he
Right.
made these physical changes to his body, hormones. You know, he was telling about, it was horrible. The doctors didn't know. Like, Buck knew more about his own transition than his doctors, and he was getting these horrible cramps. And Buck later found out on his own that it was his lady parts that were basically hibernating, like ovaries, all that stuff was shutting down because he stopped menstruating. And you know, all that stuff was basically going to sleep, but like the doctors didn't know that this was going to happen. So he actually had to basically, you know, learn about his own medicine and prescribing himself stuff. And just, he's like, oh, I need an estrogen supplement, you know, like all men have some. So was very scary. And what saddened me so much about listening to Buck speak, he was like, this is my life. He's like, I am fully a trans person, but I have other people that are trans telling me that like basically my life and my story are not valid, you know, because there's this whole radical group that say like, oh, there's no such thing as biology. You know, biological men are no different than biological women. And Buck is like, that's bullshit. That is so obviously, I mean, that's one of these base things that people know, that there are biological differences, you know.
Imagine being someone like that has actually had to put so much of their life on the line to be a first to the table, and then have the time pass by, 20 years pass by or so, and have even your stance on your very radical lifestyle be too politically correct for the modern sentiments. You know, and I'm thinking about that too. And here's another example of how they really don't care about people, and it's all about full spectrum dominance over a once great culture. And that is especially with the trans in the military. There's one thing you can't get around, and Buck would tell you, there is a 40% baseline suicide rate in the trans community, and that is regardless of pre-op or post-op.
Right.
So these are people in distress. That's not something to laugh at.
No.
So why the hell
are
are
really
you
struggling?
Exactly. So why are you telling me at that point, where you have all these people who are very anti-gun, they want to disarm the entire country, but at the same time, they think that a very, very small fraction of a percent of the population should be allowed into the military and put on the front lines where they're already in mental distress to the point where if they just stayed home, they might kill themselves. Now you're going to put a gun in their hands and put them in a war zone. How the hell is that progressive at all?
It's like I'm all for equality, but it's like what is practical? What is best? It's like, are we really serving our trans community the best way we can if we are like, you know, I don't know. I just feel like it's not the most caring thing to do. It's like, if we know that a lot of them are struggling, it's like, oh, but we push them out there. It's like, you know, you got to go serve, and it's like, oh. You know,
you
might
go,
need
girl.
some help first. Yeah.
Well, but you know,
I think that's really a huge thing that not a lot of people are talking about. And what everyone, you know, a month or so ago was so excited and all gung ho about the black square on their social media. And like, I know that some people would be like, oh, Chrissy doesn't have a black square up, I guess she hates black people, you know? I was like, no, I'm just like, there was something about it. Like, and then I started to look more into it, and I was like, oh, wow, this is just herd mentality here. And it's so easy to just throw it up on your social media. And it's like, and then I look into, oh, where is this money going to Black Lives Matter? Oh, it's just a big funding arm for the Democratic Party. It's all going into Act Blue, which has
George
funded.
Soros.
Yeah.
I just read this on a New York Times, New York Post today. George Soros has, through a few of his subsidiaries, has now pledged an additional $220 million.
I just saw that yesterday. Yeah.
I'm saying, okay. So what was it? Oh, to end racism in America. I said, okay, well, that's going to get washed. That'll get washed through that'll get either washed through Black Lives Matter or get washed through, I don't know, an overpriced cabinet on Wayfair, something like that. And it's going to end up right in Joe Biden's coffers because he can't raise money. He's a hologram in a basement, like Michael Savage says. And, you know, when it comes down to ultimately with all of these different types of where we talk about race or we're talking about gender or sexuality and all that stuff, The reason why that we're living through this is because the political arena, there is no ideas left, no real ideas that could be put on out there, because when there's no ideas left, you have to reach into people's personal lives and politicize it. So they've weaponized people's sexuality, they've weaponized people's race and gender more so than they ever have in the past, and that is the supplement for actual dialogue or dialectic in this country, and that's the saddest shit.
What do you mean there's no issues left?
Well, where are you going to go? Where do we go from here when you're already talking about, I mean, someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and this Green New Deal? That is an idea right there that you're talking about. They wanted to almost like rebuild every major structure in this country to make it more eco-friendly. They want to be able to siphon off trillions of dollars and join at the hip the United States with the UN, the World Health Organization, the climate treaties, the TPP. Pretty much we are being assimilated into a global governing body. And there's nothing really there domestically that we can do anymore, because right now all people are doing is testing the electric fences to see how much they can get away with. This entire COVID-19 thing was an operation. I'm not denying that there is a virus out there and that it has some level of lethality, but it's 0.1%, 0.1%.
It's definitely not worth, it has not been a net, all the precautions, quote, precautions have not been worth what we've lost over it.
And that's what I'm saying. What is it? People are testing out powers they never had before. The ability to shut down an entire economy and an entire world, shut down travel, tell you what clothes to wear. There is nothing left. Nobody would actually sign up for this kind of a reality in an election. So what they make it all about is which side is more humane than the other? Which side? That's why ultimately, I voted Donald Trump in 2016. And I'll probably vote for him again, because I'm thinking of nothing but judges. I'm thinking of nothing but the judiciary, because I believe that judges buy us time to actually work on the culture. And but when I was thinking about the actual, where was I even going with this? Right before I brought up Trump, it was for a reason.
Because we wouldn't sign up for this with an election. Like if there was a new person who came in and was like,
right. The reason why I hate Republicans and Democrats, and the reason where you can see where they actually, what the real truth about them have been, at least until the last couple of years, where there's such a stark departure, even though they're both progressive parties. We got two left wings over here in the country. And you look at both parties, and what do they all agree on? Nobody's talking about getting rid of or reforming or calling out that things like Social Security is not sustainable, that the entitlements are not sustainable, healthcare is shit, and that it's the centralized approach to everything is unsustainable. They don't say anything about defunding the military and drawing back our engagements in the world They don't say anything about anything. Why are we funding NATO still? Why are we funding NATO? It's an organization that's supposed to be put together so that we can help defend the Western world from a Russian threat. Meanwhile, Germany, one of those nations that we're supposed to be defending from the Russians, are getting most of their natural gas and energy needs from Russia. Why are we kicking into this? Why is the UN, that horrible, upstanding hard drive looking of a building, why is that over there in New York City? Should be turned into a homeless shelter. Get it the hell off the U.S. soil. But they all agree on this, Republican, Democrat. And because they agree on the most important thing, which is that they should be regulating our lives from cradle to grave, the only thing they have left is trying to differentiate themselves as far as who's the better human being.
Wow.
And now we're talking about, we're pondering whether or not I actually have a dick in my pants and not how far into the stars we can go.
I have one in my nightstand.
Oh, really?
That's for later. That's interesting. Boy. I've never heard anybody say what you just said, like, oh, we have two left parties. I have heard people criticize the Republicans, like, hey, Republicans should be coming after the left, like the radical left, which is now the regular left, for all like the mainstream media lies, and that they're just not standing up enough. But I've actually never heard anybody say, like, yeah, we basically have two left parties.
Republican Party was the first progressive party in the country. Its roots are in the Federalists, of course. That's Alexander Hamilton's. We had two routes in the country that we could have gone to after the founding. We had the Hamiltonians and we had the Jeffersonians. Okay, and the Hamiltonians, they were the Federalists. They believed in strong central government. Hamilton was one of the founders that actually ruined the country. And then you have the Federalists became the Whigs. The Whigs became the Republicans. The first Republican president being Abraham Lincoln, and he was a central planner. You know, he was at that point the Democrat Party. I would have aligned as a Democrat Party member. The only problem here is that I would have been a Democrat abolitionist. I don't believe in human chattel slavery, but you can't actually even talk about what the South had right, because slavery was more of a pronounced trait in the South. There was still slavery in the North up until and including the Civil War, but there's a lot of things that were lost after the Civil War. And once the South was destroyed by the North and we became a national government, that's when the United States became the United States is. And after the South was destroyed, they really had not a lot of political capital left until, of course, they sold their soul to Marx. And
Wow.
that's when they leapfrogged over the Republican Party, went so far left. That's where we have this illusion of left and right in this country, but it's still all left of the Constitution.
I mean, from what you're saying, it makes it very easy to be kind of like, to hell with both parties. Like, let's be, what did you say? Pre-anarchy, or like,
It's like it's minarchism.
oh, minarchist.
I'm right there before you go full on ANCAP. But you know, you think about it, Chrissy, how many times do people in your life have referred to Republicans as far right? It's so ridiculous, because if the Constitution is supposed to be the center, then how the hell are the Republicans right of that? They understand that far right means you're going more stateless. You're going into a more stateless, voluntary society. What happens is you have right in the center is the Constitution. Then to the left of that, maybe about a couple of miles to the left of that, is the Republican Party. Then about 3 miles left of them is the Democrat Party. And then you have, of course, Mao and Stalin and Pol Pot. But the thing here is that there's fascism is a little bit more pronounced in the Republican Party at times. Like when we grew up in the 90s, I always thought that I was a Democrat, because Republicans seemed like stiff.
They seemed old. Yeah, it was stiff, like the Bushes. It was
old, stiff Bible thumpers that I would not have. I wouldn't feel like I would have a good time at any of their parties.
Yeah,
you know, and that's why I thought I was a Democrat. But, you know, there was a lot of fascism that ran through the Bushes, the Bush family, and pronounced itself in the Republican Party. Fascism is ultimately what killed JFK, and even though they blamed it on communists. And I don't know, Chrissy, there's so much here. I think that we have two left parties and they split. There's a fork in the road, and you go two separate directions, but they're neighbors to each other. Fascism and communism, they're twin sisters.
Yeah, there's just so much I feel like people are not digging into, and if the powers that be can keep us at each other's throats and worried that the local issues are actually everybody's problem, and if we can keep fighting about whether or not the people that are close to us are racist or not, then that keeps us distracted from looking at what the government's really doing. It's like a really kind of a sad time in a way. Like I have friends and fans and people reaching out to me, be like, it's like people who are not racist, genuinely good people, second guessing themselves, and
that's the worst
part. Very
part.
sad. Yeah,
that's the worst part, because you know what I've seen there. I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's a thought that I expressed on my show recently, that they're actually, what's happening to people I know, even though I don't know, I'm not on Facebook anymore, so I don't really see too much of what's happened to some people, but I hear about it. I see screenshots, and it's awful. People have gone back and they have been influenced by the propagandists in the media to actually reimagine their life, to actually go and hallucinate that their childhood was not as good as it was. The 1990s were amazing. They were amazing for race related. There was no listen. Everybody always gravitates toward who they gravitate. You hang out with whoever you want, but we did not live. Whenever we get on, whenever a television show came on, or Howard Stern had a Grand Kleagle of the Ku Klux Klan in there. What was his name? Daniel.
Yeah, he would have a Ku Klux Klan guy play his like Hollywood Squares game. Like when Howard was great in his heyday, they have like a Ku Klux Klan guy. He would have like one square would be like the retards. Like he actually just called them and then be like the whores. And he would have it was like the most fun, but like obviously not PC game.
Why? But why was it? Why was it so? Why was it so almost like of a bad thing? Because you didn't see this shit. You know, when we heard even like on, I know that it's a very metropolitan way of thinking we have over here, but I mean, when we would see these little things where, okay, 5 Klan members showed up outside of a library somewhere in Mississippi to demonstrate, and they're just, and you look at them almost like a freak show because you didn't see it anywhere. I still don't. If you listen to Don Lemon right now and you take him seriously, you would think that every night that I go to the studio, I have to actually step over Klansmen who fell asleep outside the studio because they're everywhere.
Jesus.
You know, and it makes people go back and think, wow, all throughout my childhood when I thought things were good and I didn't have any problem making friends and there wasn't racial tensions and the television wasn't constantly harping on all this stuff, and we were able to embrace and adore Black athletes and musicians and the all of these shows, the Grammys, the Oscars, they were fun and they were inclusive. The holiday celebrations. I was just watching 1986 Liberty, the Liberty Festival, 1986 from 4th of July, 1986. That was the centennial celebration of the Statue of Liberty. To see the worshiping of our culture of legal immigration, to see all of the different types of America that we were showing off in 1986. I'm saying, were we all just hallucinating this? Was it really just, I mean, and that's what they're making you think. They're making you think that you ignored, this entire time you've been ignoring racism your entire life. It's not true.
Because that's my white privilege. Because that, that's why
it's not true. They're making us hallucinate. It wasn't that bad.
No, it really wasn't. Like the 90s, it was the age of Jordan. It's like, he was a universal hero.
It was the dream team. It was the Olympics. It was just everything.
I watched 227. I watched Family Matters.
Yeah. Full House is all white people. Family Matters. What was the other one? Oh man.
I mean, the Jeffersons was older.
That was old. Those are the kind of programs you watch when you're
Hanging
homesick.
with Mr. Cooper.
Hanging with Mr. Cooper. Fresh Prince.
Fresh Prince.
What else? What else did we do for race relations in the 90s? Man,
It just wasn't a thing. Like, it just was not being shoved down our throats, and we were just making friends naturally with whoever, which was a very diverse group of people.
Yeah. And
it's like I wasn't getting a pat on the back for having, Black friends in high school. I just had friends, and you didn't have to like talk about, there was no like almost like you have to demonstrate how woke you are. That was just not a thing. You just had your friends, and I don't know.
Yeah, and there was no purity tests. There's no purity test, and I feel every day is a damn purity test. And I look around, and I obviously I'm a very big fan of history, and I see statues being torn down. Now they're burning churches, and this is. Anybody thinks you gotta develop the bigger picture here. You gotta develop the bigger picture here. This is the systematic steamrolling of a nation to replace it with something else. And America was great. America was great. It was founded even every 4th of July. Frederick Douglass, his words of his 1852 4th of July speech are always perverted to try to make it seem as though Black people have no place in this country. I did a show with Chris Ann Hall. She's an amazing historian and a public speaker and a veteran. And we always do episodes on hidden founders or forgotten founders, the black revolutionaries that fought for independence, those who became representatives here, who fought for amazing things and understood the beauty of our Constitution. A Constitution that was not inherently evil, but it was like a pair. Our Constitution is a pair of shoes that were crafted for us that were 5 sizes too big. We had to grow into it. There's nothing in our Constitution that talks about the oppression of women or blacks or the promotion of slavery. The first time it mentions slavery is in the abolition of it.
Wow.
So there's so much here for people to grasp, but they're being hidden from their history. And because they're being hidden from their history, they feel like they have no root here and there's nothing worth fighting to save. And that's why this Marxism spell has taken root so virulently.
It's like, if you can hate America before you actually take the time to look into our history and realize it's like, we love everybody and everybody has equal opportunity, you know, but if we hate America first, we're not going to be interested in looking into all that. Nothing.
And that's why they went after academia first, the Marxist infiltration. I would say that the Soviets, they never survived to actually see what they gave us, to see it actually bloom. But it was the 1930s that it really started, late 20s, 1930s, that it really started getting bad. The infiltration of our government and the State Department with communists. And then from there, they got into media and they got into academia. And that is where the demoralization and the destabilization of the country was systematically just put into place. And we've been churning out generations of pinko socialist sympathizing children who have never known anything else. It's not even their fault. It's not even their fault.
It's just like they're raised. It's all around us. You know? So this has started in the 30s. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, this has been since Obama. Things got real bad woke-wise last 10 years. No, it goes back deeper.
Obama's a Fabian socialist. He, you look into Fabian socialism, you go back into like the 19th century for that. And it pretty much espouses the very, very small chipping away. And so it's almost like the analogy of the frog boiling in the pot. It doesn't know it's getting cooked. But in the 1930s, 20s, around there, first of all, I mean, Lincoln was an admirer of Karl Marx. He was. In fact, the Red Republicans who were German transplants that were hanging out in Missouri around the time in the 1850s, I believe they were the ones who actually created a Red Republican by the name of, I forget his name. He was the one that actually created the elephant logo for the GOP.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there's a long history of that stuff there. And then once you have the 20th century and we have the introduction of central banking in the 20th century with our Federal Reserve, shortly after that, you have the Depression. And once the Depression hit and FDR came on in, and FDR was, he ruined the country even more than Wilson did. FDR expanded the size of federal government to help. He created all these new departments, and in the creation of all these new departments to help in the assisting of the recovery from the Depression, which people like Tom Woods would argue that it actually made the Depression worse and last longer. Wow. In creating all those new doors opening, communists came on in. And once they rose in the ranks, they brought people on up. They got into the State Department. It was our State Department that actually created Red China. They abandoned Shanghai Shek out there and allowed Mao to take root. You had people like Laughlin Curry, who was standing right over the right shoulder of FDR the whole time. Communists in the Oval Office. And of course, Joseph McCarthy is always used as a cautionary tale of being afraid of, communists and how whether or not they have infested our government here. Well, here we are in 2020, and can anybody say that Joe McCarthy was wrong? That was on top of us finding the Venona Papers in 1991 after the fall of the Soviet Union, which pretty much showed all of the code names of the people that were in the United States that were working on behalf of the Soviets in the media.
Whoa.
Oh yeah, McCarthy was completely vindicated when the Venona papers came on out. And then after that, I mean, anybody, you could see how communism is so nakedly and confidently expressed, especially in the Democrat Party these days. They are walking proof that McCarthy was right. So I would suggest you go and read a book. It's a big one. It's called Blacklisted by History. It's a story of Joseph McCarthy.
How thick are we talking here? Like a summer read? Is this a beach read, Frank?
No, I don't know. It's not a beach read. It's a little Bible-y, but I'll tell you something.
It's called Blacklisted?
Blacklisted by History.
Okay.
And it's just one hell of a resource. It'll screw with you because you start seeing, it'll screw with you, especially the way that things are going on with the media, and it's all the same problem over and over again. But
wow, my sister's a history teacher. Maybe I'll have to recommend it to her too.
Oh yeah. That'll rattle a few trees.
You should be. How are you not a teacher, Frank? Like, you're just like a wealth of information.
That's why I talk for 2 hours every night.
Yeah, you're like, it's never enough.
I think it's better off that way. There's a lot less play. Although I always wanted to talk to a classroom. I always wanted to do something like that. I thought that'd be great because I really do think that the Socratic method and just I think that's what we've always been lacking in education is more open forum dialectic between teachers and students and debate and really testing out, maybe picking a theme for a class and just keeping a conversation within that theme. I think it's a lot more engaging. It's a lot better than lectures, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, what you're describing about how schools should be, I mean, I feel like that was the idea of college, right? Like that's what everybody's hope was, is that we would have these open forum discussions. And it kind of was that way when I was in college, like in the early aughts, but like certainly not now where you're having anybody with a different opinion getting, you know, a mob sent after them and they can't even speak, you know, anybody who has a slightly different opinion. So, you know, like, no Ben Shapiro's, no even, what's her name? Caitlin Bennett. She was the girl who got famous for, you know, bringing a gun to her, I guess there's a picture of her like wearing it after her graduation. I don't know if she brought it to there, but
things were really going to get bad when the comedians stopped going to college campuses.
Oof, yeah.
Like the bigger ones there. I forget some of them that were.
I think it was Seinfeld was like, I'm not doing it. Yeah. And I'd done a couple and I was just like, I felt it, you know, this was like years back, maybe like 7, 8, 5, maybe 6 years back. I was still doing colleges and like, I was feeling it a little bit like, these kids are like a little hard to reach. And like, they just are like, they just don't know enough yet. Like they're not fully formed people they've had life experience, most of them.
But it never used to be that way though.
Yeah.
You didn't go, there was never a time in my childhood or growing up and getting into college age that I ever looked at a college campus saying, all right, well, you know, here is a place where we have to be very, very careful what we say about these not fully formed human beings because they might take something as an offense. It was always in my mind that you went to college to test your limits. I mean, even just on a recreational standpoint, we're watching Van Wilder, we're watching Animal House. We're saying to ourselves, okay, well, this is where you are literally leaving all of your pride at the door and you're going to get dirty for a little bit.
Testing the limits of your liver, mostly. And
now it's just like, what do you want me to do? A knock-knock joke? Is that appropriate? It's like, oh, man.
Right. College used to be like you would slough off all of your preconceived notions, like what you came to college with. It's like, no, you were going to get your mind blown on hopefully a weekly basis. But it seems that colleges are keeping kids smaller, you know?
Yeah. Smaller.
Keeping them small. I don't know, Frank. I don't know how we're going to fix things.
This is actually the good way of doing it. And that's why I say I think more so when the absurdity, it's a lot better when the absurdity has to unmask itself and just be naked, because it's a lot easier. It's a lot harder to do this stuff when you have those very well-trained agents in society, whether they're in your personal life or whatever, that just rely upon passive aggression and gaslighting you into think that you're crazy for seeing what you're seeing and feeling what you're feeling. And that's why I say that even though I have these, I'm a Jeffersonian in nature, I still, I find I don't have any, I feel like I don't have any choice but to vote for Donald Trump again. And the only and like I said, there's two reasons why I voted for him in 2016. Number one was the culture war. I knew that this guy would go to war with the media, and it was necessary. Number two was the judiciary. If there was going to be anybody that put any amount of constitutional judges into the federal the circuit courts and of course the Supreme Court or anything like that, it was going to be this guy. It's definitely not going to be Hillary Clinton. And if that was the case, then we could probably buy ourselves time. And when I say buy ourselves time, I mean maybe 20 to 30 years before 20 to 30 years before the effects of Trump's judiciary appointments really start waning. And if he gets another 4 years of appointing judges, we may have another 40 to 50 years that we can be very, somewhat confident that somewhere along the line, there's going to be people that are going to be acting as a backstop against all of these cultural pushes that are completely illegal and are tyrannical. And that's why I say we just need to be bought time, because there's not going to be any other solution that's going to come from the federal government. It's going to come from people on a state level, people like you, people who are out there that are talking and interacting, asking questions and trying to find some way to at least soften up the soil again for something that could be fertile ground for I don't know, something that I don't know, maybe is reminiscent of a republic, reminiscent of a free society.
Yeah, it's so icky, and it's all packaged with this, like, under this guise of like, oh, this is unity, this is equality, we have to do this because this is what it means to treat people fairly. You know, how could you be against this?
Right. So it's all us.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that there's so many good people that are up to the task, because it's going to take us, and that's another big reason why the internet is so vastly under attack there too. They want to make sure it's not so much. There's definitely deplatforming going on out there, but there is a lot more subtle efforts to keep people in their own respective bubbles. So you think that you're really getting through to people, but you're only getting more popular within those who are preaching to the choir, which is why I think it's another really great thing that the central planners of society that want to turn us into a world government are forced to be so naked about where they're coming from and what they're doing, because that's going to make people who are in one bubble after a while say, you know what, things aren't getting better. I'm just going to go see what the other side has to think about. I've never actually wanted to understand what the other side wants. I mean, that's the good thing. I think that, as things get more chaotic, and it's going to get increasingly more dangerous, I think, before it gets better. But we got to go through it. Yeah, we got to go through it. Frank, we could talk for another hour at least, but I know you have another show to go do. Where can people find you? Well, the easiest thing to do is quitefrankly.tv, and that is where you can find the blog and every link you ever need to know about where you can watch the show live or access the show on demand and everything else. And I'm live Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. on either the YouTube or the D Live, the Periscope, or the Twitch. Just go search Quite Frankly, and I'll pop up. It's just me with a little jester hat on. So there's that. Frank, thank you so much for coming on the show. Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's so good to see you again. Anytime, yeah, we should hang or something. Yeah, absolutely, you guys got to come by the studio, and we'll do an in-person visit sometime. Ooh, okay, sounds good. Alrighty. Thanks, Frank. Thank you. Bye.